Here we go. Jake and Josh are here to analyze the game they love for the team they love. This is another Dolphins Podcast. Here's your host, Jake Mendel and Josh Houtz.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of another Dolphins Podcast. February is almost over, and there's plenty to talk about, but it doesn't really seem appropriate to do this alone. Marek Brave, Joshua Houtz, happy Monday, gentlemen. How we doing today?
Happy Monday, Jake. Happy Monday, Josh. You said it's the end of February here. I had to double check and look at the calendar to make sure. It is 74 degrees in Iowa today. You wouldn't be able to tell if you're watching on the YouTube. I am still wearing a hooded sweatshirt and drinking a hot coffee in the middle of the day. It is decaf. I am old. Caffeine messes me up past noon. But, 74 degrees outside today in Iowa. Definitely enjoyed my time earlier today, but now I'm on here with you two guys, and the day's going to get even better.
It's 60 degrees here, and if you are on YouTube, I'm no longer wearing the beanie. I'm wearing a hat, so you can tell that it's getting hotter up here. It is Monday. I wish we were getting ready to, talk Monday Night Football, right? I wish Monday Night Football was going on tonight. Wish we still had football, but we don't. We have other things to talk about, so hope everyone's week started out well. Jake, how have you been? How was your weekend? How'd it go?
The sun is finally shining. Dude, I have no complaints in the entire world. I wish I had a baseball team to watch because the Red Sox don't really.
I'm a Pirates fan. I'm a Pirates fan. And what do you mean you have nothing to complain about? There has to be at least one thing.
They'll complain about the Red Sox. And how about you know what I'm going to complain about? The fact that I don't know how, but I get emails about the Dolphins all the time, whether it be a press release. There was a betting website that had Jalen Waddle trade odds up. So I don't know how deep you guys want to get into this, but it just genuinely made me upset that I had to wake up on a Monday morning and get subject line Jalen Waddle trade odds with the number one team plus 400, the New York Giants. So this is some deep down analysis here that these guys really wanted me to talk about.
Now, could you bet that he would not be traded? What were the odds on that?
So you actually can't. They listed, let me see here, 7 teams, the Panthers plus 425, Cardinals plus 500. Same with the Chiefs. Mike Tannenbaum, baby, he had it all figured out. The Bucks plus 650, Jags plus 750, Ravens plus 1,000. I mean, Jalen Waddle will look sick in a Baltimore Ravens uniform. I'm not going to tease that too much further. But then the field, you have at plus 700. So I mean, this isn't happening. Why are we doing this?
No, there's no chance in hell.
I wouldn't say there's no chance in hell. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen, right? We probably would have said the same thing about Tyreek Hill coming to Miami, Bradley Chubb coming to Miami. I just want to, I guess the thing I want to know is, what are the odds that Jalen Waddle actually does get traded, right? Do you guys feel like that's going to even happen? Yeah, absolutely zero.
I'll give you up to 3, but I'm thinking 0. Well, whatever angle you want to take on it. No,
definitely not happening. That's why I wanted to know what the odds were listed as, if you could bet on whether he will be traded or not, because I'd drop some serious coin on the not being traded.
Is the Giants thing just because of wasn't Brian DeBoer the offense coordinator at Alabama? Isn't that why we thought he might come to Miami and be the head coach? So does he have that type of ties with Jalen Waddle? But that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, that poor guy, if we send him off to Jersey to live and to catch balls from Daniel Jones, I mean, oh man, that poor guy.
To catch? He ain't catching anything. I don't care how good Jalen Waddle is. Those things are not going towards him whatsoever.
Bounce right off his body, right? Right off his body.
Marek, I got to ask you, what would you do? You're just, it's like Thursday night, you're settling into kind of watch a movie or something. And, you sit down, you lean into your leather couch and you notice there's something back there that kind of has you feeling a little uncomfortable. So you're sitting there, you reach back into the couch and you're digging around. Oh, there's $15 million sitting here. What would you do with that money?
Oh, that'd be a nice surprise. First of all, I would, probably give the middle finger to all of my enemies.
Yeah,
like just things that rich people get to do. They just get to piss other people off with no consequence. So I would probably do that first. If you're asking what I would buy, I don't know. Maybe a mansion and a crazy cool car and a boat and a cool vacation. And
it wouldn't be Andrew Van Ginkel. That wouldn't be your purchase.
Oh, I got to buy a player with it?
No,
That's no, that's where you were going with it. I'm sitting here thinking, oh, now I got to shift to a minivan. I was going to divvy this thing up between Chris.
You don't need a minivan, Josh. You need like a Cadillac Escalade or something like that.
No, man, we're fitting into a Nissan Rogue right now to go to school, and it is pinched in the back, man. It's like a sandwich. So
clown car.
Spend it on that, but yeah. And then I get out looking like this. It is definitely a clown car. I just would, but I would definitely. I mean, I would try to find a way. I mean, what are you gonna do with it, Jake? I mean, I don't want to spoil anything that anybody else was gonna say, but I would find a way to pay Christian Wilkins. But I tweeted out today. I mean, we talked about it on a previous pod. Robert Hunt should be that number one priority as far as who you need to bring back this season, because I'm looking at that offensive line. I mean, we got like we said on a previous pod, Teron Armstead, and then a bunch of guys with Liam Eichenberg being one of those guys. Austin Jackson. No disrespect, Austin Jackson.
You can tell it's February. Let's say this news dropped on. It was a Friday news dump. I'm fairly certain. So February 23rd. Headline: an unprecedented salary cap increase. Boys, you better check your pulse if you're not fired up here, because we're talking cap space. Team spending is increasing by $30 million in 2024. Thank you, Taylor Swift. It was originally projected to be about $240 million. That's an extra $15 million that suddenly the Dolphins are going to have to work with. I think a lot of this is deferments from the COVID year. I'm not going to try to sound smarter than I really am. We're going to say that it's a COVID year bounce back. Long story short here. But guys, first and foremost, the Dolphins do have $15 million here, and it's not really anything we are budgeting. So it does kind of feel like found money. But how do things kind of change, or how does your perspective get warped when you consider the Dolphins weren't the only team to find $15 million here? It was there are 31 other franchises who all of a sudden are thinking, we have a little bit of extra money to spend, whether it's giving a single player that big raise or adding some depth pieces. Every team's mindset has changed slightly.
Yeah, you're right, Jake. The Dolphins weren't the only team to get the additional cap space here. And I think this will have less to do with signing, a big name free agent, a big ticket free agent, making that splash signing that Stephen Ross, lives by each and every offseason. I think where this will help the Miami Dolphins is with Christian Wilkins coming back, whether that's an extension or more likely now the franchise tag, because the franchise tag numbers didn't go up just because the salary cap did. The franchise numbers stayed the same. So when you were trying to fit in, what is it for Christian Wilkins, 20, 22, 23?
I've been saying 20 for safe math, but yeah, 22, 23. Right.
Yeah, somewhere in there, right? If you're 40 something or $50 million over the cap, that number is hard to swallow. It's hard to figure out how you're going to fit the franchise tag number for Christian Wilkins at a D tackle into your budget. The teams are working on a budget here. That's what the salary cap's all about. But like you said, Jake, all of a sudden the Dolphins woke up late last week and they had an additional $15 million to spend. That makes swallowing a $20 to $23 million cap hit for Christian Wilkins. It makes that a lot easier of a job to do. So I think Christian Wilkins ain't leaving this offseason. I completely did a 180 on that one. I thought he was as good as gone until they released those cap numbers. And now I'm looking at it and I'm going, I think we can make this work. I think we can make this happen. I think he will get the franchise tag. And I think he plays as a Miami Dolphin in 2024 because of this salary cap increase.
Let's be honest. No one wants to see Christian Wilkins anywhere else other than Miami. So if this is the way that we get Christian Wilkins back this season, I'm all for it. We do have to mention, with the salary cap going up, these players are probably going to want more money on the open market, so that might impact this a little bit. And I was going to be the Debbie Downer and say that $15 million basically pays for the rookie draft class, right? So, that's later down the road that you're going to be looking at that. But to get that $15 million that we weren't anticipating when we came into this, $45 million over the cap, sign me up for that. I do hope they find a way to get Christian Wilkins locked up, because whether it's a franchise tag, whether it's, a 2 or 3 year deal, whatever it is, again, no one wants to see Christian Wilkins line up on a different team, even though I think we've all braced ourselves for it to happen.
So Miami went from roughly 55 mil over the cap to 38.5 mil over the cap. Marek, you hit the nail on the head there, where it does kind of seem like I was ready to hang up and listen. Chris Greer, if you're sitting there 55 mil over, you want to find me another 20 mil to keep Christian Wilkins when the new league year begins, go ahead and do it. But I mean, there was a time even before this money was found, you were starting to kind of lean in that direction of keeping Wilkins. And man, seeing something like this, it not only kind of indicates that that's a possibility, but I also wonder if it means they won't have to pinch that extra penny. Maybe someone like a Jerome Baker, maybe you're going to try to cut him or renegotiate a contract. Maybe that's not necessarily something you have to do anymore. And the Dolphins, they have I think the second fewest players on the roster going into 2024. They're floating high 30s, early 40 or lower 40s right now. You do wonder that they're going to get some conversations about, yes, we could cut someone to save money, but is it suddenly a good idea just because we're going to have $4 million, but we lose a starter, we lose depth, we lose continuity? Those are big issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saw the Dolphins already make some cuts or announce some future cuts with Emmanuel Ogbah being released, and then the news leaking that Xavien Howard would be designated as a post-June 1st cut at the beginning of the league year. So they do already have a couple holes to fill. You know, we can't forget that Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb will be starting the season injured, most likely. And now you've opened up another hole by getting rid of Emmanuel Ogbah. So we got some room to do, or some work to do there. But now you got a little bit more wiggle room to get it done. I definitely think Christian Wilkins, like I said, coming back is more of a done deal. But even if he doesn't play for the Dolphins in 2024, getting this extra cap space allows them extra time to franchise tag him and then possibly trade him if that's the route that they want to go, because they want more draft picks, or they don't see working out a long-term deal with Christian Wilkins. They don't see that in the cards. It gives you some flexibility. It gives you some options to where you can tag him. And if you're forced to keep him, you absolutely can. You can play him. You have a whole nother year to work out a contract with him if that's the avenue you want to go down. But it also gives you extra time to, like I said, tag and trade if that is an avenue that you want to go down. Because we talked about this, I believe it was last week, Jake, maybe even the week prior, how that's kind of a pie in the sky scenario for the Dolphins, or it was with the old cap number, because you have to tag Christian Wilkins and then trade him very, very quickly to get under that salary cap limit, because you have to be under by the start of the league year. But waking up with $15 million extra in your pocket allows you to explore those options and kind of drags this saga out a little bit, which great for us podcasters. We can rehash this topic over and over again over the next however many months. But I do think it opens up some different doors that maybe would have been closed prior to the salary cap being raised as it just was.
Well, yeah, let me first just say spoiler alert, because you brought up Xavien Howard and Emmanuel Ogbah, and I did want to pump the brakes, because when we did the F, Marry, and Kill podcast, I believe I said I wanted to franchise tag Christian Wilkins, and everyone, well, I think Marek immediately jumped to trading him. I never wanted to trade Christian Wilkins if I franchise tag him. If you franchise tag him, you find a way to have him play. So I know Jake said that you were all for him sticking around, but I think that may have been something that I foresaw a few podcasts ago. But either way, man, I mean, you don't want Christian Wilkins to walk for nothing, right? You can get compensatory picks, you can get draft picks if he walks for a team that has that money. But if you're franchise tagging Christian Wilkins, I'm perfectly fine with him playing, because again, it's not our money, and we see other teams find a way to keep their superstar players. Why can't we in these windows that are slowly closing? Because let's be honest, guys, we can look in the mirror and sit here and say the Dolphins are in a good spot, but 2-3 years down the road, we have a full rebuild on our hands if they continue to kick this can down the road. So hate to be a Debbie Downer, but our window is closing. And if you're going to have Christian Wilkins around, that's going to make that defense much better with a guy that came from Baltimore coaching that defensive line.
After 8 seasons, Xavien Howard is no longer going to be a member of the Miami Dolphins. Drafted in the second round of the 2016 draft. Marek, let me ask you, who were Miami's 2 starting cornerbacks in 2016? Let me hear it.
2016, I believe. Oh, man, I think we had Brent Grimes.
Nope.
Byron Maxwell.
Tony Lippett. Was Tony Lippett there?
Nailed it. You got Tony.
We got there.
Josh, you can't give me any more of the no put me on the spots if you're gonna hit me with a Tony Lippett. If you're gonna hit me with a Tony Lippett over the back of the head, you can't say that. How about who started 11 games for them at cornerback in 2017?
Yeah, I got nothing. That's not Who's the Wilson that we always talk about? I'm
Jimmy
2017.
Wilson?
Yeah, I'm losing time. Yeah, 2017. I don't know who was it.
Marek, you got any guesses? Alteron Werner was on that team.
Oh my God. Jay Cutler.
Keep believe.
He was a 4th round pick. I'm fairly confident. I should have looked that up, but I'm fairly confident he was a 4th round pick. I can't believe he started this many games in 2017.
Back when they used to play their rookies?
Cordrea Tankersley.
Oh yeah! Wow, man! Wow, you're bringing out some names. Was that who was the receiver we drafted that year? That everyone thought he was going to be really good. What was his name?
Gosh,
I'm losing touch. It's not Leonte Carrou. That's a different year, right? I
think it is.
I think it is Leonte Carrou. Rutgers, right?
I think so. What was
that powerhouse school for receivers, Rutgers.
Yeah, I try to convince us that he might actually be something. I can't. That's sad that I know those guys.
We
came a long way. We came a long way.
Yeah, we've been drugged through the mud a time or two as Dolphins fans.
We haven't had a lot of great players to sit there and really root for, especially, Xavien Howard spending 8 years in Miami. In the NFL, that just sounds pretty bananas when you think about it. But I mean, 8 seasons, 29 interceptions, the most since 2016. And I do got to say, it was exciting to see Xavien Howard, people forget, led the league in interceptions not once, but twice. I think it was with in 2018 and 2020. I think 2018 he even missed a couple games at the end of the year. I believe they shut him down. Otherwise, I think he would have won that title on his own. 2-time All-Pro, 4 touchdowns, a 4-time Pro Bowler. A real like hit or miss player. And I do not mean that to be any sort of slight at X, but it just seemed like he was one of those guys who was going to take some of the greatest risks on the football field. And it seemed like 9 out of 10 times he came out on top. I mean, what was his breakout game? Was it Tom Brady?
Yes.
The throwbacks, I think it was. That was the one game. Who did he moss? Didn't he moss someone in that game with an interception?
Oh, yeah. He
I remember
Brandon
in the corner
Cooks.
of the end zone.
Brandon Cooks, I think. That was so cool.
I got a copyright flag because I posted that for his birthday, and I had a 50 Cent, it's your birthday, and every time I go back to try to post that video, it keeps getting copyright flagged. So 50, don't come at me. We don't make that much off this podcast. Please, God, do not sue me and my family.
And that's the thing about X, right? He's an all-time great Dolphin. Certainly one of the best Dolphins of the last, 8 years since he's been with the team. Maybe the best Dolphin over the last 8 years, talking cumulatively. But I don't think Chris Grier and the Miami Dolphins are doing the wrong thing by letting Xavien Howard walk this offseason. I think when you look at the cap hit that, he was going to cost the team this offseason, this upcoming season, I just don't think his play over the last year, maybe 2 years, was worth it. I feel like he's actually created more human lives than turnovers over the last couple seasons. If the rumors on Twitter are true, can anyone confirm or not? Maybe a tie.
They don't track that on ESPN. I couldn't tell you.
It could be a push. They track that on
what's the EPA? What's the EPA though? That would be astronomical, right?
But Xavien Howard, great football player. Probably has another year or two of good football left in him, but it's the old Patriot way, right? That's how they were able to stay on top for so long, is they got rid of players a year early rather than a year or two late. And honestly, we may be getting rid of him a year or two late at this point. He had that holdout a couple of years ago and the contract extension. That turned out to be a pretty raw deal for the Miami Dolphins, all things considered, but it doesn't take away from his greatness on the football field for the Miami Dolphins over the past 8 years. And happy trails to you, Xavien Howard, and we wish you the best wherever you're going, unless you're going to New England, New York / New Jersey, or Buffalo.
It's definitely bittersweet. It does sound like he has ties to Houston, so I would like to see him go there with D'Amico Ryan. How sick would that be to see him with the Texans? But this isn't something that we kind of, it's just coming out of nowhere, right? We kind of foresee this happening. I kind of go back to even the Byron Jones when we brought him in and signed him. I think I probably, there was a podcast or something that said, maybe this is a way to eventually, take over for Xavien Howard because he is getting up there in age, because he was, one injury after another. That didn't work out. Now we have Jalen Ramsey. I think even when we signed him, we all kind of thought, okay, Ramsey's coming in. You're now kind of replacing X later down the road. So that's where it is. I mean, it sucks that he's leaving now after spending 8 seasons, being that shutdown corner, quote unquote, but he's getting up there in age, like you said. The injuries are starting to continue, and that price tag. I mean, when you're looking at this, the situation Dolphins are in with the cap, I mean, this was the move to make. I know Jake will touch more on the numbers there, but I mean, at the end of the day, the Dolphins had to do what they had to do, and I'm going to be rooting for Xavien Howard elsewhere because when times were dark as Miami Dolphin fans, right, we were accustomed to maybe I'm wrong. Again, my perception's all over the place, but when we were 7-9, these mediocre teams, Xavien Howard was that one pro, that all-pro player. Jake, we always talk about Madden, man. He's that superstar player that we had for so many years when everything else looked dark. So you wish him the best of luck, unless it's in the AFC East, but it's a move that had to be made, and now we just have to wonder who's going to step up in his absence because that's a pretty big hole to fill when Xavien Howard was healthy.
It was a crazy 180 that happened. Brian Flores gets here in 2019. We understood how abysmal that defense was, and that was X's 4th season in the league, and he only played in 5 games. It kind of felt like that was another season where they shut it down, where they're like, all right, we'll give Nick Needham a shot. We'll give these other guys a shot on the boundary. And I don't think any of us really expected the 2020 season to really develop into what it was. You go out and you grab someone like Byron Jones to be opposite of Xavien Howard. And for some reason, teams just, wanted to try and test Xavien Howard. 10 interceptions. He batted down 20 balls. It was every single game he was out there doing something bananas. What was it, Josh? We had a tracker going for this, I think. What was it? 30-something straight games with a turnover in that Brian Flores defense. A lot of that was just X's ability to get those 1v1 matchups and really take advantage of them. Something I did think was interesting, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, and we could even chalk it up as like a one-off comment, but Xavien Howard this year in Vic Fangio's system, Josh, you wrote a story for the Finsider about how Jalen Ramsey said goodbye to Xavien Howard and kind of hinted that Vic Fangio wasn't using him correctly. Do you guys kind of think back to these interviews that Xavien Howard had? Because, I mean, there were times he had his interception of Mac Jones. He said that this defense puts them in a position to make plays. And then there are other times where he was like Jalen Ramsey, having to say, these guys know what we're capable of, what's going on here. So do you think anything was going on there, or was it just I'm just going to speak my mind to the media every single time, and if it's not a consistent message, oh well?
It could have been as simple as the defense playing well early in the year, and then they started to falter a little bit towards the end, and maybe he gets a little frustrated, and maybe, there were things that these players were willing to overlook regarding Fangio's coaching style earlier in the year when things are going well, and then as the screws start to come loose, these are the types of things that, when you're asked about them, you decide to be a little more honest about and open up a little bit more. And we're pseudo journalists over here. Jake, you're a real journalist, so I'm not going to lump you in with Josh and I, but that's the type of player you want to talk to, right? You want to talk to the guy who's going to be honest with you and not just, spout the old athlete cliches of one game at a time, and we got to review the tape and yada yada yada. So I'm not going to fault Xavien for being honest later in the year if he was frustrated with the way this defense was going, but Fangio's gone and now Xavien's gone too. So we have a Jalen Ramsey here. He gave Xavien props on the way out. There will always be that what if that you look back on when you think of Ramsey and Howard together. If they could have just stayed healthy, if Ramsey could have started the season healthy, if Howard could have finished the season healthy, would it have been different? Would they have made a difference? Because, I mean, just put those two names next to each other, Jalen Ramsey and Xavien Howard. They should have been the most dominant cornerback duo in the National Football League. They should have been the best cornerback duo in Miami Dolphins history. And I know that's sacrilege for some when you talk about Surtain and Madison, but it Ramsey and Howard absolutely could have been that. And we never got to see it, and we never will get to see it, barring anything unforeseen happening, in the future. Xavien coming back after a 1-year sabbatical. It happened with Jason Taylor at once upon a time. So we'll never say never, but yeah, there'll always be that part of me that wonders, man, what could have been if they would have just stayed healthy?
And I hate to be that guy, and I'm not claiming he's on the same level because Let's be honest, Jalen Ramsey has always been at the top of that, but that's the same way Byron Jones was. I mean, we were all posting Patrick Surtain and Sam Madison memes. We saw how dominant they looked when they were on the field together. So you're always going to wonder what if with that to the next level. You're always going to wonder what if with Jalen Ramsey and Xavien Howard. It's pure speculation, but I think a lot of it might just be the way Vic Fangio and that I don't want to say the age gap, but probably the way he didn't even take into consideration what the defensive backs coach and the secondaries coach and different coordinators wanted. I just think maybe that rubbed the players the wrong way. And like you said, when you're winning games, all that can be forgiven. But once you start to spiral out of control, once you lose faith down at the end of the season, once we see this thing sputter, we were trying to get up that hill and we just could not do it. That's when you're starting to hear things like this. So what if, man? We're always going to wonder what if Jalen Ramsey, Vic Fangio, Xavien Howard, we can name off all the players in that defense. What if they all came together for one season? What would happen? And sadly, we just had one injury after another.
So Xavien Howard's cap hit for next season was going to be $25.5 million. Instead, he'll be designated as a post-June 1st cut. So post-June 1st, the Dolphins will get $18.5 million in cap savings, which doesn't help them anytime in the foreseeable future, especially when you're about to walk into the new year. Before we get to the money, though, but my final thought here, and I'd like to get your guys' impression, it did kind of seem like the Dolphins very publicly were signaling that, hey, Xavien, we'd love to keep you around. We'd love for you to take some sort of pay cut. Kind of just the homer in me, the fan in me kind of wanted to see Xavien Howard maybe do like the parents saying, I don't know, we'll see. But in reality, they're going to work out something behind the scenes. But from the moment the season ended, it was kind of obvious. Xavien Howard was like, nope, no chance I am going to take any sort of pay cut. If you're going to cut me, go right ahead. I totally get him for doing it, but there was that part of me that was so hoping that slowly we'd see things work out and we could get Xavien Howard, Jalen Ramsey round 2 some sort of way.
That would have been nice. Absolutely would have been nice. But Xavien Howard has always been a man about his money. We saw that a couple years ago with the holdout. I think we all kind of thought he was a goner at that point. I was not expecting a deal to get done 2 years ago when he was holding out. So at least we got a couple more years of X. But yeah, in my opinion, there was no chance Xavien Howard was ever going to take a pay cut. He's got kids to feed, man. Lots of them. So that's where he's going. He's gonna find a way to do that. He's gonna go somewhere and try to make a decent amount of money. Do you guys think wherever Xavien goes next season, he's going to get paid? Obviously not the $25 million that he was going to get paid in Miami this season, but do you think he's going to get paid like a true lockdown, shutdown number one corner? Do you still have the franchise tag numbers for players up on the computer there, Jake? I'd love to know what the franchise tag for the cornerback is this year, because that's an average of what, like the top 5 salaries in the league. That's where they get those franchise tag numbers. And so at that point, we could kind of take a look at what that number would be. Do you have it, Jake?
20 mil.
So 20. Okay, great. 20 mil. Nice round figure there. Do either of you think wherever Xavien goes this season, be it Houston, where it's rumored he would like to be, or any other team, do you think he's going to make $20 million this season?
On a 1-year deal, God, I don't think so. I think if Xavien Howard was to see any sort of number near 20, it'd have to be a multi-year deal where he's getting paid kind of what the Dolphins did with Jalen Ramsey. That first year, I think Ramsey last year, $3.75 million cap hit. I wish I had that in front of me, but I don't. I think that's the only way we see something like that happening for Xavien Howard is first year, maybe he makes $5-6 million, and then there's maybe 2 years on the back of that where it's $20 million, 30 years of team option, something along those lines. Looking at it real quickly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 teams have over $50 million. The Commanders are first, slightly under $80 million. God, if I'm the Commanders, I don't imagine paying a quarter of my open cap space just to kind of spend or acquire Xavien Howard.
Yeah, that I don't know, man. That's a lot of money to spend on a guy like Xavien Howard. Xavien Howard, he's just older. He's older. He's aging. He's been injury prone as of late. His play hasn't matched his salary, and I almost wonder, the reason why I asked this, I almost wonder if Xavien's going to wish he would have taken a pay cut with the Miami Dolphins. I wonder what number they were floating in his direction. Hey, can we get this 25 down to closer to like 16 mil, 17 million? Can you give us $8 million back, $9 million back, something that we can use to help pay Christian Wilkins and get him on this defense, and we can all make another old college try at the Super Bowl. I wonder if he is going to get a deal less than that and goes, damn, I should have just taken that cut that the Dolphins were offering. I wouldn't have had to move the family. I could have stayed in sunny South Florida instead of moving to Chicago or someplace like that where it gets cold all the time and windy and snowy. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think we're kind of all in agreement that he's not sniffing that $25 million, let alone the $20 million for, the average of the top 5 paid cornerbacks in the league.
Yeah, I can't see it happening, but we're sitting here talking about the cap going up and, these players wanting to ask for more. So, stranger things have happened, right? If it's can't even sit here and fathom 2-3 year deal, depending on how it's structured, maybe a team I have no idea. So I'm not going to sit here and say it won't happen, but I would be pretty surprised. And I was even going to ask, do you think, he goes out there, tests the market, and then he's looking at the Dolphins like, okay, what offer did you want to give me? Can I come back? Because let's be honest. I mean, he had to have liked what he had here with Miami. We're talking about how he's playing and the injuries and things like that. Let's be honest. His game has completely dropped off a little bit, had a 56.1 overall, take PFF for what it is, 63.9 against the run, 51.9 in coverage. So this isn't the same Xavien Howard, might not get that big deal, but again, we've been preparing for this for, Marek said, 4 or 5 years ago. So here we are now. Xavien Howard, we wish you the best of luck.
I wonder, if you're in his situation, you just spent 8 years in Miami, is the change of scenery and this goodbye, like just end it, worth to maybe make $2-3 million less than if he was to accept that $16 million with Miami? Because I'm just trying to think, if I've been somewhere for so long and I do kind of take that stand of I don't want to take a pay cut. I do kind of wonder if you'd say, look at New England or another team with some cap space and say, yeah, I'll do 13 mil just to kind of show them type of thing at that point. I don't even want to make up this fan fiction here, but I just kind of do wonder if it's goodbye now. I don't know if I see a world where he would come back and say, well, you guys would give me an extra $2 million. I don't know if he'd ever be someone to swallow his pride like that, but it's definitely an interesting topic. And one final note, Marek, I'll let you go, but housekeeping, the Dolphins have 44 players under contract currently. That's the lowest in the league. The Lions are second at 45, Chargers third at 49.
Well, going back to your Xavien Howard point, I do think he is a prideful man, and I do think he would kind of jump at the opportunity to stick it to the Dolphins if he could. Whether he'll be able to do that or not, whether these teams will be interested or not, we don't know yet. But it'll be an interesting offseason, and, outside of Dolphins news, that'll be something that I kind of keep my eye on to see where he ends up.
Josh, I saw you post a bunch of Xavien Howard things that are clips that you shared on Twitter at Houtz. Be sure you're following him. Josh, as we wrap up Xavien Howard talk, was there one highlight, maybe something we haven't talked about yet that really sticks out as one of his doper moves?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll say the highlight that really stood out to me, but I just went back and I was just seeing people post different things. And I'm like, well, shit, man, you probably have a bunch of things. I didn't post half of them, but to me, it was just the way, right? He would just almost be in a receiver's pocket and almost trail them until he saw the ball come out. And then he would it was his trailing speed, his closing speed on that ball that was just second to none. But if you're asking me which one stood out, it has to be that one-handed grab. I think it was even against Tyreek Hill. That one, I think the Dolphins may have been wearing their throwbacks. One-on-one where Tyreek Hill went up, one-handed interception. So, Xavien Howard at one point, he's a very rare type of cornerback. So, hopefully he can get back to that level. So that would be it, Jake. Just his ability to, pretty much take over an entire wide receiver, erase him, and just the closing speed. It was pretty impressive to watch during his 8 seasons here in Miami, and now we're going to have to watch it elsewhere.
Starting to move forward a little bit, the Dolphins are going to be getting $18.5 million in cap savings come June 1st. Josh, you mentioned that draft that you're going to have to pay for. I think that's going to be about $10 million. It really does plummet. However, if they do decide to go crazy, trade up for a second first-round pick there, then you might be getting a little more expensive. Marek, I don't know if you saw this, but some things to consider. Connor Williams, his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said that Connor's going to wait and take his time before signing with a new team. Do you think that he might be waiting till June, as in waiting?
Certainly possible. Certainly possible. But there's always danger in doing that. He has to recover that ACL and prove that he is past that injury and able to, be a quality starter for whatever team signs him, be that the Dolphins or another team. But there's always a little danger because the NFL draft happens in late April, which is a month and a few days ahead of June 1st. And there are quite a few centers that look like promising starters, this upcoming season as rookies. And I think the Dolphins will be looking at some of those guys. We've talked about JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson. I think I got it right this time. Sorry about that. But there's other guys too. Zach Frazier is a center that a lot of people have been talking about. He could be the consolation prize for whatever team misses out on JPJ. There's Graham Barton of Duke, guys talking about him. Cedric Van Pran of Georgia. Doesn't that sound like a kick-ass center's name? I'm Cedric Van Pran. You know what I mean? Like, that's cool. I like that. But there's Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin. There are guys in this draft that you could plug and play day one, and they could be your starter for at least the next 4 or 5 years on their rookie deal. But hell, if everything goes well, they could be your starter for the next 15 years. So in all honesty, I'm kind of out on Connor Williams. I know we talked about this earlier a couple weeks ago. Josh mentioned it, our tag, cut, and sign long-term episode we did. And I believe I was tagging Connor Williams, signing Robert Hunt to a long-term deal, and letting Christian Wilkins walk.
Same.
I'm not doing that anymore. I think I'm letting Connor Williams walk. I am tagging Christian Wilkins. I'm still signing Robert Hunt to a long-term deal, but I've got my eye with that number 21 overall pick, first-round pick, first time the Dolphins have had one of those in a long time. I have my eye on a center. I have that being JPJ, and if he's unavailable, maybe we can do a little trade-down scenario into the early 30s, pick up an extra, late second, early third-round pick, grab our center with that pick in the early 30s. I'd love a Zach Frazier there. And then, fill some other holes with that extra draft pick because the Dolphins desperately need draft picks. This is a really good draft class, according to all of the experts out there. And the Dolphins find themselves with only a first-round pick and a second-round pick before they're waiting until, I believe, pick 157 in the 5th round after pick 55 there. So that's a long time to wait. I'd love to see them pick up another draft pick. So Connor Williams, you wait till June. That'll get you your money. Go somewhere else. I'm solid. All right. I'm tagging Christian Wilkins. I'm signing Robert Hunt, and I'm drafting my center now after letting Connor Williams walk.
The thing here, though, sorry to step on your toes, Josh. Both Connor Williams and JPJP have experience playing guard. So why aren't you doing both?
Well, for me personally, man, and I'm sure we're going to get into this as we get closer to the draft, I am enamored with so many offensive linemen in this draft that my first-round pick is a center, my second-round pick is a guard, and I'm re-signing Robert Hunt, and my offensive line is solidified. I didn't mention him earlier, but Troy Fautanu has guard and tackle flexibility. I would love Troy Fautanu in the first round. Start him at left guard, and then when Teron Armstead leaves as a post-June 1 cut next year, because that has to happen when you look at the mathematics on that, I'm sliding Fautanu up to the left side, and now he's my starting left tackle, and then I'm drafting another guard to take over for him. So I am all about the offensive line this offseason. I hope Chris Greer is taking it far more seriously than he was last offseason when I believe he laughed at all of us while looking into a camera and said, we care more than he does. And then, that offensive line started out hot, but kind of faltered towards the end there. And injuries were a big part of that. But that's where my head's at. So a little sneak peek when we get into our mock draft episodes in the coming weeks. But I'm going center first round, guard second round. There's a lot of quality prospects out there. And you have to remember, that doesn't happen every year. Every year you hear about how weak of an offensive line class it is and how the college ranks aren't getting these guys prepared for NFL football. That's not the case this year. This is the year you load up on offensive linemen, in my opinion, and that's exactly what I'd be doing if I were Chris Grier.
Yeah, and the same people said that you probably shouldn't, you should trust the process with Vic Fangio and not moving around Jalen Ramsey. So sometimes, it all works out as the fan base does say. I was going to sit here and say I'm all for sitting there and keeping Connor Williams on speed dial. I mean, he's not going to get paid as much as he would have, as a free agent if he had a healthy season. He's coming back from the injury. He's familiar with Miami. You bring him back, at worst, he's your center. At worst, he's playing guard. I guess at worst he's your center, right? You want JPJ. I want JPJ in here.
He's depth, and Liam Eichenberg has a dope beard, and he's good.
Yeah. So either way, you're bringing him back for 1 year. Maybe I can't imagine him signing for anything more than that. And then you're solidifying the left guard spot over Liam Eichenberg, perhaps, or if he has to jump in there at center in case JPJ is not ready to go. Whatever it is, I'd rather have Connor Williams there if the money's right. So I'd keep him on speed dial. But definitely interesting to see that, he's not going to be quite ready with that injury, and he's going to hold out and see. Because then at that point, right, it's just going to be a team that has an injury, and they might just throw a whole crap load of money at Connor Williams because he's the best available center available.
That's interesting, and I think that's a good point. I just do like the idea that the Dolphins are going to get that boost post June 1 to something they could also do is maybe that's when you start discussing a Jalen Phillips, a Jalen Waddle type contract extension. When you consider that Jalen Waddle's 5th-year extension is about 16 mil and Jalen Phillips is about 13 mil, maybe you kind of kick the can with both of them and you say, Xavien Howard, you don't have the option to have a 5th-year option. We got to make sure we sign you first and foremost. So that could be where the Dolphins decide to use that money. One more thing before we wrap up here. I didn't think we'd go this long, but I mean, you think about Xavien Howard's career, how great he's been. The salary cap is really a adjusting topic as we get closer to the new year. And guys, Emmanuel Ogbah will not be on the team next year. I had to double take because it took me a second to realize he was actually here for a long time. He was in Miami for 4 seasons. He is being cut $4 million in dead money. That means the team will save $10 million on the salary cap. Marek, not a lot of surprise with this one either.
No, not a lot of surprise. You could kind of see the writing on the wall there, and I think he did too. He had a couple cryptic tweets late in the year. He had I believe he was a healthy scratch at one game. And honestly, it turned out they could have used him in that game. I believe
he had his chance after that with all the defensive end injuries, and still didn't do it. That would start to steal your spot. That made me super frustrated.
Absolutely, and Ogbah kind of went the way of Xavien Howard. 2, 3, 4 years ago. Emmanuel Ogbah was one of the best players on the Miami Dolphins defense, and he gets a big money extension and then kind of falls off a cliff. And you hate when that happens. That is not the way you want to spend your money. And like you said, writing was on the wall. He wasn't going to be a Miami Dolphin next year, not with that cap hit. He's a solid contributor. But if you're relying on Emmanuel Ogbah to be your number one edge rusher, then you got problems. And the Dolphins, thankfully, have some good young pass rushers in Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, obviously coming off the injuries. We've talked about that ad nauseum at this point. But either way, with those guys being hurt, you weren't going to keep an Emmanuel Ogbah at that salary. So he's not going to sniff that again for the rest of his career, but he'll get a decent chunk of change to go somewhere and be a rotational pass rusher and probably not, a 75% snap taker on any defensive line around the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, and I do have to remember going back and being pretty stoked on what Emmanuel Ogbah meant to this defense at one time. So I'm not going to sit here and try to crap on him, but I mean, he had 18 sacks his first 2 years, then signed that contract extension, like you said, only 6.5 over the last 2 seasons, 20 tackles this year. To me, you said that he's not going to be that guy that you want as your number one pass rusher, but for me, he wasn't supposed to be that this year, and I still wish Vic Fangio would have found a way. So, we look back at Mike Gesicki and we say, okay, Mike McDaniel's this offensive guru. Why couldn't he find a way to utilize Mike Gesicki? You're probably going to say a similar thing with Vic Fangio. Why couldn't you find a way to use Emmanuel Ogbah, especially when we talked about on the last pod, Christian Wilkins playing X amount of snaps. You had injuries here and there. I mean, it wasn't until you absolutely needed to use Emmanuel Ogbah until he was out there. So we saw the writing on the wall. We knew this was going to happen. Wish him the best of luck. But the Dolphins got, like you guys mentioned, 2 very good pass rushers in Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. Unfortunately, those guys are injured. So we're going to see who steps up at the beginning of next season, but that's a long ways from now.
Something we've talked about time and time again is if you want to get paid, it goes down to the sacks. And you guys mentioned it. He had 18 sacks, 9 in each of his 2 first seasons in Miami when he was on a pretty solid deal. And it did seem like a minutes to midnight scenario when he did sign that extension in 2022, because it was during that window where players could negotiate with other teams. And I think it was actually that Wednesday when players could start signing elsewhere. It was that morning, I believe, that Ogbah decided to return to Miami. Considering that the Dolphins are in another spot like this, where it's going to be hard to keep these middle class level free agents, is there someone who that the Dolphins might be talking to that you're hoping they bring back? But it might be another scenario like this where the emotions, the feelings are kind of getting in your way of Ogbah being a solid player, but clearly the contract extension, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
I mean, you brought his name up early in this episode, Jake. It has to be Andrew Van Ginkel for me. I think there's people out there that think he's going to get like a ridiculous amount of money. I'm not necessarily, on that train. I think he'll get a good chunk of change, 7-8 million a year. And if the Dolphins can find a way to fit that into their cap, I think, he's always been such a high motor guy, such a relentless, energetic player. Every time he hits the field, something good happens. And, again, we've talked about it a lot, but with the Chubb and Phillips injuries, you're going to need somebody to step up early in the year. And he's somebody who the Dolphins can trust because he's done it before. And I would just love to see, Gink back in that aqua and orange, kind of wreaking havoc on opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know Andrew Van Ginkel, but he just seems like one of those guys that would take I don't want to say a fair deal with the Dolphins, right? If they gave it to him. And like you mentioned, we would absolutely need him. As soon as Jake said, is there one player that you want the Dolphins to bring back? I think we talked about him on the last pod, and I just kind of blacked out, and that's all I heard. I went with Deshaun Elliott. I don't know that he's going to be sitting here fighting for big money on the open market. He's not a guy that, probably has any ill will towards the Dolphins, but I think that secondary was much better with Deshaun Elliott in there. So that's a guy that I think could go under the radar, that a lot of fans are just, I don't know if they're overlooking them because we have so many players that we need to figure out something to do with here. But Deshaun Elliott in that secondary, I want to see that back in Miami. But Andrew Van Ginkel, if that popped up on our phone, we'd all be doing Willy Wonka heel clicks, right? We'd be like, let's go, baby, getting our yellow Van Halen or AVG wigs on. I'll dye my hair blonde.
Do it.
Elliott's an interesting one because I think it would be a good deal. I think that's a position the Dolphins could probably lock up another 1 year, $4 million contract, something similar to that he had last year. And just keeping that continuity in the secondary would be a nice bonus for the unit as well. I was thinking about, is Andrew Van Ginkel that guy? Like, are you going to fall for the cheese? But considering the injuries to Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, I don't know if he falls in that category. God, everyone's going to get mad at this, but what's the odds that type of player, the one where, you loved him, there was some great moments, maybe they flew headfirst into the end zone after they recovered a fumble. Are there any other players that maybe could possibly fall into that category of it'd be better if we just draft the replacement? Maybe I'm hinting at Robert Hunt here.
I mean, Robert Hunt, you were kind of talking about mid-level free agents. I don't think that defines what Robert Hunt is about to get this offseason. I think he's about to get a good chunk of change here. But I would be ecstatic if we could get Robert Hunt back in the mix. And I feel like he's the type of guy that you want to do that with. Like he's a young guy. Also similar to Andrew Van Ginkel, just a high energy, high motor guy, always doing the best he can for this team. And I feel like, eventually you got to start keeping some of these players. You got to keep some of your own. And it sends a bad message if you're always letting your own free agents walk and trying to replace them with other guys.
What do you mean always? Who has that happened with?
Well, I mean, not recently, but, it does happen with the Miami Dolphins here. And it wasn't necessarily that they were letting people walk, but, they traded Minkah Fitzpatrick after that relationship with Brian Flores went sour a little bit there. And I would really like them to be able to keep a guy who's as cool, as fun, and as good of a football player as Robert Hunt is. So if I'm looking at the options, if I'm reviewing this, like I said, I think I want to keep Robert Hunt. I think I want to keep Christian Wilkins now that we have the extra space. And another guy like Connor Williams, who was kind of a hired gun and an assassin drafted by another team, and we poached him and signed him to a 2-year deal. He can go sign a 2-year deal with somebody else, man. Let's keep the continuity with our core youngsters, and let's try and build on that.
I'm just glad I'm getting to that age where I'm starting to, understand that's a business, right? And not you have your heart have a dagger going through it every time one of these players walks and goes elsewhere. Jake, I honestly thought with the AVG thing, you were going to play devil's advocate. I mean, last year he was on the open market. I think maybe the New England Patriots want to give him some money, but besides from that, I don't know how much his interest was out there. I don't know how much interest he'll have out on the open market. How much different was this season going to, how much more money is he going to make after the season he had compared to before? I mean, he did have a very good year. I could see that going up, but I thought you were playing devil's advocate there and saying if he wasn't that coveted last season on the open market, what changed this year? And I really don't know if I have an answer for that.
What's changed this year is the injuries. That's the only reason I can't really play devil's advocate with AVG, because I genuinely buy into the idea of not only are you getting talent, you're getting a little flexibility, and you're getting continuity with someone who was drafted by the team. That's why I went in the Robert Hunt direction, because right guard, I wouldn't necessarily call it a premier position. And if we're going through these scenarios every couple of years, we got to cut some guys. And when you look at something like Emmanuel Ogbah, we waited to the last minute to re-sign them, and you felt good about it. But then halfway through the year, you trade for Bradley Chubb, and all of a sudden things feel different. I'm not trying to hate on Robert Hunt at all here. I think he's an awesome player. That's where I'm trying to play devil's advocate a little bit, because it would be a nice chunk of change for a right guard. And when you're talking about can we re-sign Jalen Phillips and Javon Holland? Well, we have, our right guard making $17 million a year. That's going to be in the discussion as well. Again, not trying to hate. I think if they do sign Robert Hunt, I'm not going to be upset at that whatsoever. But that's just one of those awkward paths I think you could find the Dolphins slipping down.
Interesting offseason ahead, and we're only just beginning. But, hey, we got each other, man, and we got all our listeners out there, and we're going to get through it all together. And these are fun times to be Dolphins fans.
I was just going to say I would absolutely be pissed off if they didn't bring Robert Hunt back. I know you're saying that you shouldn't pay a right guard that, but I don't know why. I kind of always view him also as a right tackle, an elite right guard, a guy that can also jump over there, play tackle. Again, I just think – you can't let those players go. And I guess we're getting ready to get going, so we won't even talk about it. But yeah, so devil's advocate is I don't even think that Chris Grier could draft a guard, if we're being completely honest.
Boys, you have said it all. That is all the time we have today on another Dolphins podcast. Thank you so much for joining in. We will be back later this week with another show, but until then, fins up.
Fins up, baby.
Fins up.
Fins up.